may have also seen that the Free Press, that's Bari Weiss's outlet. So it's a fake anti-cancel culture, anti-woke culture outlet that actually, as people know, Bari Weiss leads the charges to have people canceled all the time. She tried to get Professor Joseph Massad fired of Columbia.
The free speech absolutist who's absolutely against free speech.
Right. I guess she's consistent in that way. Yeah. So she had a journalist, someone named Maya, do a report on the scathing, indicting Harvard report that just came out about anti-Semitism. So a friend of the show, this is a Katie Halper show co-production, made a little bit of an edit where we fill in some of the missing information or offer some analysis of this video about anti-Semitism. So let us take a look. Free Press reporter debunks Harvard anti-Semitism report in 3 minutes. Obviously, that's not her intention. Okay.
I'm Maya. I'm a reporter for the Free Press, and I just went through Harvard's anti-Semitism report, and here are some of the most disturbing things that I found. Nearly 60% of Jewish students at Harvard said they'd experienced discrimination, stereotyping, or negative bias on campus due to their views on current events.
Being judged for your views on current events isn't anti-Semitism.
Jewish students also said that they concealed their identity from classmates.
No one made them do that.
And have been ghosted by longtime friends for expressing sympathy for Israel or for simply appearing on an Instagram post with someone who did.
In other words, their longtime friends had no problem at all with them being Jewish and only ghosted them when they turned out to be Zionists. That's not anti-Semitism, obviously.
At Harvard Medical School's Admitted Students Day, one student was told by another that Zionists are not welcome at Harvard Medical School.
Zionism isn't Judaism, it's racism. It is not anti-Semitic to call someone out for being a racist. It is anti-Semitic to equate Zionism with Judaism, like Maya is doing here.
At Harvard Divinity School, an Israeli doctoral student said that the professor began a class about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by telling students that the discourse is saturated with the Israeli narrative.
It is. The Palestinian narrative gets almost no play in American media. Of the 3 MSNBC hosts who expressed sympathy for Palestinians, 1 has been fired and 2 had their shows canceled.
And that she had decided to, with a heavy heart, remove Israeli sources from the syllabus.
Good.
During listening sessions with the Anti-Semitism Task Force, Jewish students spoke about Harvard-run privilege trainings, where they were told that they were deemed to be privileged not only by dint of being identified as white, but also because of their Jewishness, which allegedly endowed them with an even higher level of privilege.
On average, Jewish Americans have the highest percentage of households earning $100,000 or more.
Students reported that when they voiced concerns about bias, they were asked, who is more marginalized, Jews or Palestinians?
Palestinians.
In response to a friend who knew people who were killed at the Nova Music Festival, one student reported a close friend said, I mean, I guess that sucks, but what did they expect?
It was an insensitive comment, but the question of why anyone would go to a music festival so close to occupied land is not unreasonable, nor is it anti-Semitic.
Another person asked, do you believe in decolonization in theory or in practice?
What does that have to do with Judaism? Good question.
An Israeli graduate student reported that one of his friends was told that it would hurt his career to associate with a Zionist and to be publicly associated with one.
That is not even a little bit true. No one's career has been hurt by associating with Zionists. There are, however, countless examples of people's careers and even lives being destroyed for standing in opposition to Zionism.
These are just some of the findings of the report based on 50 listening sessions with a total of about 500 students, faculty, and staff, as well as over 2,000 respondents to an online survey, including 477 students who identified themselves as Jewish.
In summary, she read the entire report on anti-Semitism at Harvard and couldn't find one example.
You can read my full report at thefp.com.
You can, but it's just more of this bullshit. So that's the report on the report. But I mean, I was actually surprised that they couldn't dig up more lies or more inflammatory examples of randos saying something, which is what they often do to pretend that there's a systemic problem. But that's really scraping the bottom of the barrel. I didn't hear anything anti-Semitic there.
It's DEI on steroids.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. But, you know, it's so disgusting. But I bring it up because I think it's so important to remind people what we're not talking about when we talk about this. So just to summarize some of the recent things that have happened, I mean, it's so disturbing, but, you know, people get, I think, used to the images of genocide, desensitized, let's say, But I think it's really important to remind people or update people because it's so never ending and nonstop. So last night, the Gazan photojournalist Hassan Eslaith, who provided widely circulated photographs of the October 7th attack, was killed by Israel while recuperating in Nasser Hospital from burns he sustained in a previous attack. Okay, he was killed along with one other person, and that makes Elsa the 178th journalist killed since the genocide began. Israel also bombed the European hospital in Khan Yunis today multiple times, killing at least 28 people. Over the weekend, this is, unbelievable. Over the weekend, an Israeli gunboat murdered the 12-year-old Mohammed al-Bardawi on Rafah Beach. He was one of the eyewitnesses to the massacre of the 15 rescue workers, paramedics who were executed by Israel. He recounted what he saw to the New York Times. And so he was killed, and he's 12 years old. And in the West Bank, Israeli soldiers shot and beat a young man, Mohammed al-Kasba, who was entering the Kalandia refugee camp. This is something that, would be front page news. If any of these things that we just recounted happened to Israelis, it would be front page news. And then you have Netanyahu saying some really scary stuff, seeming defiance of the opening of channels between the U.S. and Hamas. So he said, quote, "We in the coming days will be entering with all our strength to complete the process to subdue Hamas. It could be that Hamas will say, pause, we want to release another 10 hostages. Okay, release them. We will receive them. And after that, enter. But there will not be a situation where we stop the war." He also suggested forcing out 50% of the population. And he will not, even though Hamas has agreed to cede power in the Gaza Strip, they won't totally dismantle, totally disarm. And Netanyahu is saying that unless that happens, they won't stop.
I mean, if I may say something about this, one interesting thing that I don't know how it's been reported in other places, but one interesting feature is on the 27th of January, the Palestinians effectively annulled the effects of the genocide by, in a very organized fashion, marching northward from wherever they had been displaced to, back to northern Gaza, back to Gaza City, back to the various camps around Gaza City, back to the small towns north of Khan Yunis, and so on. That was actually a defeat for Israel, because whatever gains Israel might have thought it had made, and the United States as well, saying, we're going to build a Riviera, Trump talking about, building, I guess, the Trump Hotel or whatever. The fact that, thousands of Palestinians marched in an organized fashion on that one day with drones filming them, with young Palestinian men climbing up cell towers and flying large Palestinian flags, that was a directly in-your-face sucker move to Netanyahu. And right after that, and I take that as an enormous victory for the Palestinian resistance, that act itself, and I don't think we've actually emphasized how important that was. That meant that right afterwards, Netanyahu starts one of the most vicious sieges, because that's when the food gets cut. Almost right after that, they start saying, we're going to shut off this, we're going to shut off that again. And they try to, in a sense, replay the genocide, in real time, in order to get people out of there once more. And people are not going to move. Right. I mean, people are basically saying they can kill us here.
Netanyahu can say whatever he wants, but of course, the decisions will be made for him by the Americans, because Israel, at the end of the day, is a client regime. It's a proxy state, and it will do as it's told. It's been somewhat amusing, to see in recent days, as part of this meltdown of Israel flunkies saying, we don't need U.S. military aid, almost as if for all these years they've been doing the United States a favor by deigning to accept several $1 billion in free weaponry and Security Council vetoes and all the rest of it. But, Netanyahu has pledged that Israel will resume and intensify its genocidal onslaught on the Gaza Strip once Trump leaves the region. If it does, that means it has a green light from Washington. And if it doesn't, that means that Trump and the person who is effectively a Secretary of State, Steve Witkoff, have decided that Israel should do otherwise. So we will be learning quite quickly which way the wind is blowing.